Hello, friends. Hello, friends. A tradition unlike any other.
Oh, my goodness. In your life, have you seen anything like that?
There it is! Adam Scott, a life changer. Mashed potato!
Here it comes.
Our great friends at Puma Golf are proud to introduce the new Ignite Articulate golf shoe, taking cleated innovation to the next level, thanks to an all-new articulating outsole, midsole, and upper that is designed to flex with your foot and deliver the highest level of support. Built to meet the rigorous quality, aesthetic, and performance demands of the world's best golfers, the Ignite Articulate combines Puma's tour-validated technologies in a lightweight, extremely comfortable package with a modern athletic silhouette that can handle any swing from any lie in any season. Make your move now. The Ignite Articulate are available in-store and online in Australia, starting from just $250. For more information, visit cobragolf.com.au. This is the 19th Tee podcast. Kieran Marsh and Nathan Drudy back with you for another week. Drudy, so we flagged this one. We did a teaser. I think that's what they call it in the radio parlance last week to say that we're very excited to have this guest. I think last week I referred to it as long-time reader, first-time speaker. For us and this guest tonight. I speak, of course, of the deputy and digital editor of the Golf Australia magazine, Jimmy Emanuel. I'm very pleased to say has joined us. Jimmy, thanks for taking the time and joining us on the 19th Tee.
Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here.
Mate, I think we were just kind of talking a little bit before we hit the record button, and I said when we talk to players, we generally always ask them how their journey with golf started, but I think it's as relevant irrespective of your connection to the game, whether you play, whether you write, whether you talk. Where did it all start for Jimmy Emanuel, or your love of golf, or at least your connection to the game?
So I played every sport as a kid, like a lot of kids. Anything with a ball, I was in. So golf was just naturally part of it. My old man was an all right golfer, not great, but keen. And so I got a first set of clubs about 7 years of age, I think, but I played with mum's cut down ones for a little while and played it, in the summer holidays outside of cricket and rugby and all that sort of stuff. And then as I started to not get picked in teams in the other sports, I realized I could do golf on my own. So I started to play that more, and wasn't big enough to play rugby and wasn't good enough to play cricket. And so, played a lot of golf, played with my old man all the time on school holidays and that sort of stuff. And Sunday afternoons, we used to go out and try and beat each other's brains in, and then became a career. I sort of wanted to play golf for a job, but once again, wasn't good enough and got hurt and had an operation that didn't work out. And I worked in golf. I worked in golf shops. I was a club fitter and a club builder and, did all that sort of stuff, and then fell into this sort of at the back end of that. So I've been around golf my whole life and love it. I don't love playing it as much anymore because I'm not as good as I used to be, but still love everything about it. And that's the great part about golf, right, is that you can be involved in it and not necessarily play it that much, or, you can play it heaps and not be involved in any other part of it. So it's the beauty of the game, really.
I think you've probably been incredibly modest that you just fell into your current role. So we'll pick that apart a little bit later on. But I'm fascinated by the desire to stay connected to the game in any way, shape, or form. You play, you have an injury, but post that you're club fitting, you're working in pro shops. What is it about this game? Because I think there aren't too many casual fans of golf. I think it either gets its hooks right into you or you're not into it all. So, you've had that lived experience. What do you think it is about this game that sinks its teeth in and you'll just find a way to be involved in the game of golf?
Oh, well, I mean, you can never be perfect in golf. It's impossible. You can't actually be a perfect golfer. You can't have a perfect round of golf. You can't have a perfect golf swing. It's always got something to improve at. Now, for myself, stepping away from the actual playing side of it, there's so many different elements to it that you can remain attached to it. So you can teach it, you can sell it, you can write about it, you can do a million different things. So that was the attraction when it came to working in it, that I hadn't done anything else really. I'd worked in sport shops and stuff as a kid, but I knew golf, and I found it great fun working in a pro shop selling range balls and Mars bars, but working with old golf pros telling me stories about, when they played an Aussie Open with Nicholas in the group in front and that sort of stuff. So there's the history to it. But then working, like I say, I've done a lot of different things in golf and I found them all fascinating. Club fitting, you're trying to make another golfer better, which is I've divorced myself from the fact that I might not get any better, but I can try and make someone else enjoy the game more. And they come back to you telling you how good they're playing, how good they're hitting it. That's a great feeling as a golfer. Club repair and stuff. I became obsessed with that stuff, putting grips on dead straight. And, I used to do a lot of club work for tour players. A bunch of guys played in Asia. Darren Beck's one particular one. And, I used to love doing their clubs. It was so precise and so interesting. So there's so many different elements to work in it, and then to play in it as well. I'm going out to have a hit tomorrow with you and Porter and a couple other guys, and we're going to all take retro gear out. So, even I might not enjoy going out and trying to shoot a score with my current clubs. That's fun to me because, it's trying to remember how to do it, and it's different, so there's all the layers to golf that make it so good, whether you just want to play once a week with your mates or whether you want to be all into it 24 hours a day like someone like myself is.
That is right up Ports' alley, isn't it? Retro round. Oh my days.
Absolutely.
I can just see him with this little fucking driver head that's like this big and little niblets and all that sort of weird shit. I'm sure he's got it all. But
mate, I can tell you, I play a fair bit of golf with him and probably drink more beers with him, to be honest. But he hits some of these golf shots with this retro gear that you cannot believe. During the Vic Open at Barwon Heads, he hit the best one iron into the second I've ever seen in my life. It's the best golf shot I've ever seen in my life. And we're all straight out of the car, having worked all day. And I stood there going, what are you doing here? What are you doing playing golf with me? I think you're supposed to be over at 13th Beach. But it's right up his street.
Where does the love of, I guess, broadcasting and being a journalist in the game, where does that come from as well? Because it's all very well to enjoy the sport, and we all have passions in life, but you've also got to enjoy your job as well. So where does that side of things come into it for you?
Yeah, so I actually, funnily enough, when I was at school and I was sort of thinking about what I was going to do when I left school, I did a careers test that said I should be a sports journalist. And I laughed at the careers advisor. I said, "You're kidding, aren't you?" And I was never very good at school. I didn't like to pay much attention. I sort of retained a lot of knowledge, but I was a hopeless worker. I had to find out where the library all my mates used to go to in year 12 was, just so I could meet them before we went out one night. And I had no idea where it was, where they were all going every day. But I knew it was there. I liked writing. I loved reading. I love reading sports books about any sport. I love watching any sport. So that was always there. And then this opportunity to work with Golf Australia came about through knowing Brendan James, who's the editor and has been for a long time. And I sort of said, would you have a go? And the main thing I started doing was equipment, because that was my background. So we started talking about doing a bit of that. And, it's a great job because I get to involve myself in every element of golf. I write the equipment stuff. I might go into a course review, but tournament golf and professional golf is sort of where I specialize because I've known a lot of the guys since we were young. And if you do this sort of work, the thing that keeps you going is covering tournaments and covering tournaments in person. If there's anyone who works in golf media that doesn't actively get out there, I can't understand it, because chasing interviews that no one else is getting and following the play and then writing a game story about it afterwards is so much fun, and just being around it and the sights and sounds of golf is unreal. So, and again, it's different every single day. I've covered a whole lot of golf tournaments in my time, and I've never had one day the same. So, and it can be from a bludger of a day where it's called off with rain and you watch some players sitting around joking and they start telling you stories, to, a perfect day where you watch the best result you've ever seen. So, there's just so many elements to it, really.
Have you found, particularly, I suppose, as you were starting out when you made that transition, that there's an advantage to being a slightly younger voice in this space? I think that there's a perception probably of the game more broadly, which I think has probably changed off the back of COVID and the amount of people who've taken it up. And I think it's been re-energized and rejuvenated in a lot of respects. But prior to the pandemic, I think a perception of the game more broadly, and particularly the coverage of it, that it was a little tired, a little old, a little stuffy, and that the injection of probably a younger voice or a next generation probably was a great deal of help. So I wonder what that first kind of, those formative years were like when you're just a different alternative. You're a different option. Some are maybe a little bit more relatable in particular, and how that worked for you.
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit different. I was one of the younger ones, but there was a few around. I mean, Evan Priest writes for Golf Digest. He's about the same age as me. He was in a different role at the time with Australian Associated Press, admittedly. But I to be honest, coming in, I leaned on the older guys to learn how to do it. I spent a lot of time with guys who were experienced, following them around golf tournaments to work out how they did the job, because I had no real idea. I knew that I saw guys interviewing players and I saw words ended up on a page, but I didn't know how you made that happen and how you did that sort of thing. So I followed guys like Rod Murray and John Huggan and Mike Clayton around at tournaments and watch what they do, and Brendan as well. But just to get an idea, and then I think it does work, maybe not to an advantage, but it is a point of difference. And my relationship with the players is probably very different to a lot of the older guys. There's a lot of probably rules in inverted commas about being a journalist, and no cheering in press centers and all that sort of stuff, that some of it I can get on board with, some of it I find a bit strange. But then the relationship with the players is another area where people are funny about it to a certain extent. And I tend to, when I'm there working, I'm working and they're working. And then when we're not, if we're out catching up and having a drink or having something to eat, we're just relaxing and catching up. So I think that's helped players come to me a lot. Maybe some of the conversations and also makes it maybe a different point of view to read or listen to as well. It probably means some people who read our content and stuff don't like it as well, because they're more used to a different kind, or they themselves just don't sort of vibe with what I do. But that's fine, that's good. Different voices is good. There is more and more younger people, but they need to be encouraged to find their own voice as well. And I think a lot of the older guys joke that I'm youngish. I'm not young, and I don't think I'm not really new wave in terms of how I do things, but I'm sort of in the middle, and I think that's good. And I think it'd be great if there were some younger guys, particularly in Australia, doing something, even more different to a point. And then there's still space for guys who've been doing it forever and work in that style as well. Because again, like golf, there's layers to it, and if there's layers to coverage, people can find what they want. People can learn different things, and you get different perspectives and understandings, and it improves golf and improves people's golf knowledge, which is great.
How have you observed golf media changing in your time in that space? I mean, I don't necessarily think it'll be materially different to how the media in general has evolved and changed, but probably its application to the game and how covering it has probably evolved since you've been doing the job.
Yeah, it's definitely different. It's sort of constantly changing, really, because there's so many different markets and so many different focal points and everything like that as well. I mean, we're at Golf Australia magazine, we're part of a bigger publisher that does a whole lot of magazines in different segments. And golf's fortunate, a lot of people still like a golf magazine because, to mention Brendan again, he's our course photographer. He goes out and shoots golf courses, half his life. And golf course photos turn up brilliantly in a magazine. You buy them, and if it's your favorite course or top 100 courses, looking through that is brilliant. So the magazines still stay strong, but then video casting, podcasting is now a huge part of golf, and that's growing and growing. So there's this really diverse options that's getting more so every time. The coverage and the people who cover it is definitely changing it. You got you guys like No Laying Up and Barstool Sports and all that sort of stuff who've come in, and they do it differently. And a lot of people will love it. A lot of people might not like it, but it's different, and they're there to cover golf, and they love it, which can't be a bad thing in my opinion. But with what's happening in the golf world now in men's golf, it's probably even more divided, because there's people sticking to certain sides of a battle, I suppose. And then there's people going in looking for content that's one-hit content, asking a player to get an opinion, get a joke or whatever. It's not really working towards a story or putting something together or telling something. It's instant gratification journalism, I suppose. And I don't work in that space, so I don't know if there's a market for it, but it's a changing sort of area. And I think we'll see that interest over the summer out here as well because of what's happening and because of, Cam Smith winning the Open this year, and we've got the Aussie Open back for the first time in a couple of years. We'll have more interest in people covering the game, and it'll be a really diverse subsection of it. There'll be people like myself who are there at as many tournaments as we can be. There'll be TV, there'll be radio, and there'll be smaller time guys who are just getting into it and just want to get started and grab the bite and get out of there. So it's definitely more diverse, but it can only be a good thing. If there's more people covering the game, that means there's more people digesting the content, and the word of golf sort of spreading, which is a positive to my mind.
More idiots like us talking about the game. That's what it is.
Perfect. Exactly. That's exactly what we want. If you're passionate about it, it's great because, and that's what I say. I think a lot of people maybe try and start into it and think, oh, there's negative feedback. Maybe we're not doing the right thing, but there's always going to be negative feedback. I talked about it in a column I wrote the other day about social media with golf. Is so much is instant nastiness at the moment, which isn't good. But if someone comes to me with feedback and they say they don't like something in a proper conversational manner, I'll talk to them and see why we have a difference of opinion. And maybe I can learn something, maybe they can, or we can just get to the end and disagree. But people getting started in stuff in golf, I think should just, be encouraged that they're doing something different, or even if it's similar to someone else, there might be a market for it. Even if it's just their mum and dad and a couple of mates who listen to it, it's good. It's what we should do.
I think that's exactly sort of why we got into it, Marshy, right? Like, going back all those, 3-4 years that we've been doing this now, we kind of just got into it as a way to keep in touch with each other and talk about a bit of golf every now and then. And, we're very fortunate that we've had a good little following grow. And I mean, it's not massive, like we're not talking no laying up numbers or anything, but, we've got our own little Aussie golf following that, hey, they come to us and they listen to our rubbish opinions that we put out every Monday night while drinking a beer and swearing. Like, we're very different in terms of probably what people are going to see in your columns, Jimmy. But it's good that the whole ecosystem kind of works together, and when it does work together, it only fuels the growth of the game as well, which is, as cliched as it is, it's what everyone's after, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's I think that's where really good stuff comes from, is people with just a really genuine driving force to why they're doing something, that we just want to talk about golf. And it then leads to maybe being a really positive thing like what you guys have had, where you're getting more and more people get involved and players wanting to come on and chat, and it becomes a bigger part of your lives and a bigger part of people's lives to listen and digest the content. But it's come from a really genuine place of being interested in golf and wanting to talk about golf. And there's a lot of people who want to do that who maybe don't understand how to podcast or something like that, or a lot of people who just want to get in their car and listen to guys talk about golf and swear and do whatever and carry on. And I like doing that when I go out with mates who are all golfers who I don't see that often, Bucks parties and stuff like that, and they ask me to tell a few stories and do all that sort of stuff, and I love doing that stuff. It's great. And if that's a market for people of a podcast, then you're right, it's, to use the most overused and probably untrue phrase in the game, growing the game.
It's a good little segue, I think, to probably talk about where we find ourselves. You kind of telegraphed a little bit in terms of the period of transition the men's game finds itself in at the moment. I think probably where I'd start, because you touched on an interesting point about the negativity that's around at the moment. In your time, probably not even covering the game, maybe just in your experience with golf, have you ever known there to be a more divisive time than what we're in right now? Because it seems like there's very little grey area. It's incredibly binary in terms of the opinions that it's inspiring in people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anything like it in sport in my life. I remember bits and pieces of rugby league and the Super League war, but and I've spoken to a couple of guys who are involved in that period of league, and I think it's right up there in all sport in terms of splits. It's unbelievably binary, as you say. It seems that you can't sit on the fence on this, or at least people who express their opinions publicly don't want to sit on the fence with it. It's fascinating to watch it happen. For us as a title, we're trying to provide as balanced coverage as we can. Now that includes news coverage. We preview all the live events, we preview all the PGA Tour events, DP World, LPGA, PGA Tour of Australasia, and we wrap them all. And then we've got a bunch of guys who write opinion columns every week or other week, and that often includes differing opinions on, live or the PGA Tour or whatever, and sometimes nothing to do with professional golf, as it should be. So we're trying to be balanced. And it's so interesting that last week, in the space of 24 hours as a title, we were accused of being on the payroll for Liv and Greg Norman, and then also PGA Tour simps who hate Liv. Like, it's unbelievable that there is not a gray area. You can't exist in the gray. And that's what we're sort of trying to do. I mean, I've got my own opinions on it. Brendan's got his, and that's fine. And we can express those. But as a title, we need to cover everything from a news point as well. But yeah, I find it amazing that it's so one way or the other. There can't be any difference of, can't be any slight difference of opinions. I think that's driven a lot by, the two main entities involved in the PGA Tour and Live with, trying to get their players to say the right things that work with their sort of storyline of it. And fans love these guys, so they fall into line. And, there's a lot of false equivalency, a lot of whataboutism and all this sort of stuff out there as soon as anything gets mentioned. And, hopefully it settles down, because I think people forget that we're all golfers who are talking about this stuff. We all love golf. And, I'd hate to hear of an idea of, a four-ball going to play golf and they start talking about it and they find out two of them are, guys who love watching Live and two guys love the PGA Tour and Rory, and end up getting in a yelling match. Like, we're all golfers and it's golf, and it's got serious repercussions for the professional game, what's going on. And I don't think we should take it lightly, but at its core, we're all people who love golf. So, I think a little bit of thinking before we hit the reply button on Twitter or whatever and call someone a name because they like something different to us, it'd be a pretty good idea.
I don't know about you, but it seems to me, and I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head in the sense that a lot of this is existing in the echo chamber that is Twitter, which probably in and of itself is an issue. But for mine, it's like, it's almost an inflexibility or an inability to not even change your mind just to hear a different opinion. Like, I know for myself, I don't know about you, like probably where I started when it first emerged to where I am now, I've definitely felt a shift in my opinion on it. But I don't know that there are a large percentage of people who have the ability to do that. It almost feels as though like you set yourself in sand and, right, this is how I feel, and I can't see another person's opinion. And that tends to be, at a macro level, a broader problem in society, but it's very focused on this issue right now and this point in time for golf, because it is the topic of the day, and it is very binary without an ability to maybe evolve your opinion in any way, shape or form.
Yeah, 100%. I go back to that column I mentioned before, and it was along the lines of what's happening in golf and in social media of golf, and Twitter is probably the best example of it, because the most engaging person to person is sort of a reflection of society in general. It's our own version of, a US election. It's that sort of, you've got one side and you can't listen to someone else and they're completely wrong and an idiot because they don't agree with you. And I think, my thoughts on it have stayed similar, but I appreciate that I've got a job to do with it, and I can appreciate the improving nature of elements of what Liv is doing, for example. So, I'm watching it, I'm paying attention to it because it's my job, but I'm taking in what I see and having conversations with people. If it's a civil conversation, I don't mind it getting a little bit heated, but so long as it's, maybe the account that's coming at me has a picture of themselves and their name, that might help. But, I'll listen to the conversation, but the conversations just need to be a little bit more, a little bit more of a conversation rather than yelling into the void and not expecting a response. But I think it's interesting to look at it, everywhere I go, where I go to, function or something with golfers that are there. My old man's mates are a great example. They all love their golf and they'll watch a bit of golf and they just want to talk and tell me what they've heard and all this sort of stuff, which is fine. I love doing that stuff. But it is, as you say, just they've picked this side and they're falling to it, because Cam Smith's the greatest example. I mean, Cam's one of the most popular guys I've ever come across on any tour, and he's a great fellow. I've gotten to know Cam decently well, interviewing him quite a lot, and I've never seen someone sort of gain popularity so quickly around the world. Like there wasn't anyone saying anything bad about Cameron Smith, except for maybe you need to get a haircut and that moustache is a disgrace. But as soon as he signed, the feedback on our social media platforms was split down the middle. You know, there was people calling him names and people saying, you know, he'd done the wrong thing. And then there's people saying, I love him because he's gone to live. I didn't like him before. That it just has to be so decisive about where you fall. And I think that's, again, in the making of the people in charge of these entities and how golf's set up as well. That's fanning those flames, and then the social media age fans those flames, and it's going to keep building and building. And then I think it will, to be honest, settle a little bit on the argument front once we get a little bit more set and they start existing and the PGA Tour exists, and you know, we can get a bit of a better gauge on what LIV's going to look like next year when they go to the expanded schedule, and you know, and see what decisions come with world rankings and stuff like that, which will, you know, help decide where golf goes. But yeah, I don't think the two people in charge of the two biggest entities involved want to have a civil conversation. So how are two people on Twitter supposed to, you know?
What $1 million question, but like, what's as someone who's so closely ingrained in the golfing world here, can you try and articulate what the impact of LIV might be on the Australian tour? I mean, we've tried to digest it for the past 12 months, but you know, it changes so rapidly that it is hard to put an answer to the question. But it seems as though there are going to be ramifications. You know, we were asked that obviously we're co-sanctioned DP World Tour events. Can we allow players to come back and play those? You know, it seems like we're pissing off the PGA Tour if we do that, but we're pissing off the players if we don't. Like, it just seems like, you know, we said a little while ago, it seems like Aussie golf and the PGA is in a really tough place. Like, they're damned if they do and damned if they don't in some ways.
Yeah, I absolutely. I agree. They're in a tough spot. And look, I think it's going to be one of those things we have to wait and see. There's no real firm idea of what's going to happen for tours like ours as a result of this. The tour, I think, did a good job when they got involved more heavily with the DP World Tour. They did speak, to my understanding, from having spoken with the guys in charge at the Aussie PGA about whether they'd spoken to Liv and Greg and that sort of stuff. And I believe they had, and that helped in their negotiations with DP World. Now, they had no idea what Liv was going to look like and how it was going to fold, because at that stage it was still just backroom whispers. We didn't actually have a schedule. We didn't have anything like that. So they were looking to give Aussie Tour players pathways. They say pathways a lot down there about talking what they're trying to do, and that's what their role is now. You know, we're not a huge big tour that stands on its own, that you can just play the Aussie Tour and make a great living and retire and do all that sort of stuff. You play there to get to another level, and they've helped to do that with Corn Ferry, you know, final status and DP World Tour cards. There probably wasn't an angle for them to get that with Liv. You know, they might have been able to get in with the Asian Tour or something like that, but there probably wasn't an existing angle to do that. And it's a small player field each week, so there's only so many players that can play, and they've already signed up a lot. They pay a lot of money, so they're not going to kick them out anytime soon. So, look, I think they're in a good spot, but the co-sanctioning of the events might put them in a difficult position. DP World Tour, we don't know what will happen with the legal case that some players have brought against them to be able to play. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But exactly what that means for co-sanctioned events, you know, it's not a standalone DP World Tour event. It's a PGA Tour of Australasia event with DP World. So, you know, at the moment, we've got I shouldn't say that, two guys who are going to play the Australian PGA and the Australian Open who are LIV players, and there hasn't been any drama about it. I'm sure there is a lot of discussion down there at where are they now? Sandy Golf Links, and about how it all shapes out and how it looks. But there's a LIV event coming here apparently in April, but that'll have nothing to do with the local tour. You know, there was a lot of talk about Australian Opens and stuff being LIV events from punters. Well, I don't think it can be. I mean, no. You know, we can't turn the National Open into a 48-player limited field event where there's 5 Aussies in it. Like, we don't want that. So, I think Live is its own beast. It's got the Asian Tour for a purpose, but it's a standalone sort of thing. The DP World Tour stuff is going to offer our players some opportunities, but hopefully the local tour keeps using our position as probably an important part of it, with the development of good players and events that can be co-sanctioned or whatever to build our profile and our status. And we are now linked up with the PGA Tour, who with their wraparound schedule have done a fair bit of damage down here. Mm-hmm. Mark Hayes wrote a great piece for us last week that was pretty scathing of the PGA Tour. And Europe had a similar thing with their scheduling, but it's now time, I think, for us to look forward and see how we can improve it rather than blame everyone of how we got into the position we were in. And I think the guys down there, at times have been critical of them and publicly so, but I think, from every conversation I've had, they're working towards something that's going to benefit Australian golf. And I think we have to see how this summer plays out, and then it's bookended with a live event and maybe a couple of international series events on the Asian Tour, and see where we sit in golf's ecosystem before we know fully what it's going to do to us. And who knows how Live's going to play out, if it's going to be in 20 years this huge, strong bastion of professional golf, or if it isn't around then. So you're hitching your wagon to someone, and they've hitched their wagon to the established place, which makes sense to me. Yeah.
And of course, they're potentially bringing an event out here themselves, a PGA Tour, right? They've got that alleged international series, whatever that looks like, we don't know. I guess you touched on the live event that is going to come here, and I believe it's Sydney that they're looking at. Although Royal Sydney that knocked it back recently, or New South Wales, or someone knocked it back?
Yeah, there was an article about Royal Sydney that they didn't let them in there to have a look.
Yeah,
so yeah.
Sure. Anyway, whatever it was, I'm just wondering. Obviously, we've seen Live is generating a fair bit of hype in these cities that haven't got a lot of love from the PGA Tour, but I'm wondering if that's a good or a bad thing for Australian golf in terms of, if we bring a Live event here, is it just going to completely just push our tour to one side, or do you think it might actually help and say, no, we do have a really good tour here? Can they coexist in your mind, or?
Yeah, I mean, they've tried sort of one-off events down here before. So, they had the WGC match play here in, I want to say 2001, but I'm testing my memory there, where Steve Stricker won, but no one came basically from the States, and it was a disaster. But at least the Live event is scheduled after our tour season is complete. So that's a positive, that straight away they haven't come in one of the weeks where we've maybe got a Players Series event and said, we're going to put something on so no one pays attention to what else is going on. I think we can coexist with whoever wants to play tournaments here, but I think the important thing for our tour is to make sure that our players get representation in events that come down here. I saw something from Jared Felton a little while ago saying I'd really struggle to see an event come to Australia that was a big event or take over a big event, and then we can't get in because, that's the way the field's built. So the PGA Tour of Australasia needs to look after its players, and that's what it's trying to do. I think we can coexist of having, not to call it an exhibition tour, but effectively an exhibition in terms of it's a one-off here and it's showcasing people who aren't normally here. It would be great if, when Live does come here, they work around this where we're playing the rest of the events. So we're playing the Aussie Open in Melbourne. We're playing the Aussie PGA in Queensland. Well, Sydney's not got, apart from, Players Series event, doesn't have a big event this year. So it makes sense to target Sydney in a different city. And then if the following year the Aussie Open's in Sydney, then target Melbourne. But I'd say there's probably, they haven't found a venue yet. Greg says, they've got a lot of interest. I've heard otherwise from people at clubs. But again, the clubs are really split. People on board, some love Live Golf, some love PGA Tour golf, and they're split. So I think clubs are probably cautious about getting involved, and whether that risks future hosting opportunities from the local tour. And, and I can understand why the local tour isn't actively saying that's the case in public, because they're still working out how it's all going to work. So, more golf down here is good for people like me who are going to go out and cover it. I think a good example of a different sort of event is the Sandbelt Invitational last year by Jeff Ogilvie and Mike Clayton. It was a standalone event. There was no mention of money. It's kind of like the anti-Live in terms of No one knew how much the prize money was. There was prize money because it's a professional golf event. It was all about the quality of the golf course, not about the players. It was, we're going to invite people, but it's about older touring pros playing with younger touring pros and playing with younger amateurs and learning from each other and enjoying it. And it is going to be a standalone event, to my understanding, from talking to those guys who run the event. They talk to the local tour about the dates, but it's not an Aussie tour event because they want it to be their own thing. So it is standing alone. It's coexisting in that ecosystem where it's going to be a different sort of event and it's not going to count, but they'll still get players wanting to play it. So it can work in around those other big events. And, if Liv wants to keep playing down here and they pick dates that don't interfere with our circuit and our schedule, that's, we can only wait and see how it plays out down here. And if it's well received and if there could be a couple of Aussie guys get a start in it. I mean, there's obviously already guys playing there. Trav Smythe converted some great Asian tour results into $1 million week. So, there's opportunities there. And when they bring an event here that happens, or even the international series, and guys can get Asian tour cards, it's hard to argue against it.
Last one on Liv, Jimmy. Do you foresee a path back to reconciliation in its current form, or do you think that? I think the elephant in the room is that for as long as Greg is in charge of Liv Golf, there's probably not a path back to reconciliation. And so, if that's the case, whether or not we think Greg is the long-term solution or whether he was the figurehead to give it the impetus to kickstart and someone else comes in. But everyone who goes over, the most recent one is Bryson talking this week about the fact he's confident that down the path they will come back together because there is no other choice. I don't know. For as long as it seemingly as it currently stands, that this is a bridge too far to bring these two houses back together.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see it happening anytime soon. It's gotten to real mudslinging. They're real having goes at each other and painting each other in poor lights, whether it's the players having a go at each other or it's the two tours or, the people running them, that they're all getting quite petty and trying to make the others look as bad as they can. So trying to get them all into one room and make them happy and friendly is going to be difficult. In saying that, I'm sure behind the scenes, a lot of the players are more friendly still than we would perceive, judged by the, what everyone sort of takes away. But yeah, I can't foresee the PGA Tour being willing to sit down with Greg while he's in charge. And then, he said last week he's not interested in sitting down and he's made every effort, and which is very, very different to what he said at the start about there's enough pie for everyone and we can grow the pie and we can all have our piece of the pie, which I think is, a bit of not quite the truth at the start there. It's trying to take the players and the players, to be, a lot of them from the text messages in that lawsuit filed were told, they couldn't be banned. Well, they are. So I can't foresee a time where players who have stayed with the PGA Tour are happy that players who went to Live, got paid, can come back and just play on the PGA Tour. And, the other guy that plays the PGA Tour didn't get paid and he's still there and there's no difference. So there's going to be that schism between the playing groups. Greg and Jay Monahan aren't going to sit down in a room and nut it out and come out with a great solution. So I think Greg's, he's been very aggressive in the job that he's taken. They probably got the right man for what they needed to do in terms of making a splash and being disruptive, because he's willing to do anything to sort of get the story out there. So they've made the noise, but maybe that was just his job to usher in the start of it and step aside, or, they might see it as a long-term solution. But yeah, I don't see all of these sort of houses of golf coming back together. The DP World Tour and PGA Tour are going to stick solid to each other. Asian Tour and Liv are obviously going to stick solid, and the smaller tours are going to sort of attach where they feel most comfortable or most beneficial to them. And look, I think it depends on a couple of things happening as to when or how a reconciliation might happen. I think world rankings is going to be the biggest one. The four majors have shown no sign, I wouldn't suggest, of banning Liv players. They may not be the biggest fans of it. I mean, the PGA of America didn't really make much noise about Cam Smith winning their Player of the Year award. So that would suggest they're maybe not that enamored with Liv Golf, but they don't seem like they're going to ban players. And if they don't, the world ranking points is the barrier. but Liv doesn't currently qualify under the eligibility of the official world rankings. So yes, it's run by the people that are against them. Sure, that's not helping, but they also don't qualify for the eligibility. So if their players are saying we want world ranking points to be able to get in, they'll have to work out a way, and that will be making a bit of a go back to the PGA Tour in a way, albeit via the International Federation of Tours to get somewhere, and that may open up a conversation. Or there's got to be something that sort of sparks, I think, a reconciliation, because at the moment everyone involved is doing their best to inflame the situation. So I think we'll probably be a while before they all sit down and try. I think that's the thing, is you'd like to see them try, but at this stage, no one's making an effort of it.
Let's turn our attention to home. By the time we get this out, we're probably 2 or 3 weeks away from the beginning of a huge summer of golf. It kicks off in Kalgoorlie. And I think, when they announced the schedule a couple of weeks ago, we were overwhelmingly positive about, I suppose, the volume of opportunities to play, which hasn't necessarily been there for a variety of different reasons. Obviously the pandemic and a number of others in recent years. But we have said, and I'm keen to get your thoughts, it feels like a very important summer for the game in this country because of the fact that we do have a full schedule of results and events back. And it feels like this is the best opportunity the administration has had in a long time to show the value of the game, to attract outside sponsorship and outside support and outside capital investment. Because one of the big problems we've had is probably how reliant the game is on state government contracts and state government support to take events to certain places, which is why Sydney's being neglected, which is why Adelaide's being neglected, because we're getting the support out of Queensland and Victoria. Now that we have a full schedule of events, it's chicken and egg, right? Sponsors aren't going to come with the cash unless they see people turn up in droves. They see the players coming back from overseas. But for that very reason, you're going to get one shot really at this, because if you don't nail it this summer, it's tough to go again 12 months' time and get the same level of support out of players coming from overseas, out of clubs, out of state bodies. So it feels like maybe the most important summer we've had in a long time in terms of setting up the game and its health in this country long term.
Yeah, I agree with you absolutely. I think they're going to get a great chance to attract sponsors as well, because golf is one of the hot button things. I mean, I've never been more popular in my life. I get radio and TV requests all the time, and I'm not that good looking a bloke and I don't talk that well. So it's only about the golf, right? So there is more widespread interest in golf than there's ever been. Like I said before, people come up to me and want to talk about what's going on in golf. Now, it's good and bad because of the nature of the money of Liv and the backstory and everything like that attracts parts of it. But there's going to be more eyeballs because we're playing golf in this country and people know there's stuff happening in golf. They know we've got, 2 current major champions, and hopefully they'll both play down here this summer. And so there's going to be the players coming. There's going to be more interest. And as you said, we've got a really good, strong schedule that's going to traverse the country as well. We got Western Australia and, there's Queensland, there's Sydney, there's Melbourne, there's a little bit of stuff everywhere, and then you've got your things on the edges as well, like your Sandbell Invitationals and your Blitz Golfs and all that sort of stuff, and that's going to help too. So look, I think it's one of those things. I've sold a few things in my time, but I don't work in commercial sponsorship, so I don't know if you can put the cart before the horse that easily. But it strikes me as a good chance to showcase what we've got and look to lock people in to spend money with us in the future. I really like how the focus so far with the player announcements and signings has been on local players, and there's certain things in tournament golf in this country that we may not like, we can even hate them, but they're part of the landscape. They have been for a long time and they always will be. And that is state governments pay to have tournaments in their state. And that's a good amount of money. So it's about, and again, I don't sit down in these meetings, but maybe trying to make sure that there's out years so you can take the Australian Open if it's, signed up to visit Victoria every other year, you can take it out to New South Wales or Queensland or whatever. And, accept that support, but still own your event. And about getting those Aussie players to play them, because that's a return on the investment for the people who are spending money, and it's an attraction to people who might want to spend money. and it's going to get eyeballs on it because people know who Cam Smith is, people know who Adam Scott is, people know who Anna Green is. So you need them playing here, and it's a really good schedule. It's what they've been working towards for a while. I was down in Melbourne when they announced the schedule, and we've had a rundown here where things haven't been done perfectly at times in terms of how things are run, but we had things like I mentioned earlier about wraparound schedules not helping us and all that sort of stuff. But then COVID hits, and then the second half of COVID hits last summer, and then we also get one of the biggest wet periods we've ever had down the East Coast. So I covered New South Wales Open, TPS Hunter Valley, and a third one either side of that, and they were all three tournaments were shortened events because we couldn't get it done. But it was credit to the tours. They got them on, they got them playing. So, they've had a really rough run, and this hopefully is an uninterrupted run at showing our wares, I suppose. And then hopefully reaping the rewards out of, investment. And I do know, like I've spent a bit of time with some of the guys from Cisco WebEx who have sponsored the Player Series, which is a new innovation that Nick Dasty and Kim Felton came up with. And, the guys that were involved with that loved everything about the event and how it all went. And so it was positive to hear that. And you talk to people and they like what they get. Sponsors who are involved currently seem to like what they're getting. Now, it's not a perfect strike rate. Nothing is. But so it's just getting people into the golf ecosystem and the sponsorship ecosystem, I suppose, and seeing them reap the rewards. I mean, from a player perspective, we've got locally the guys that, mainly play the Aussie Tour and the WPGA Tour, some absolutely great golfers, but also great people who do the right thing by the sponsors. And then our big name overseas talents, primarily to a T, do the right thing too. Cam, like I said, Cam's a great guy, and I imagine a pro-am situation is fantastic. Adam Scott's fantastic. Mark Leishman's great. Hannah Green is one of the best people in golf. Like, these stars we've got, if you want to call them that, are our assets. And the other assets are our golf courses, and we're finally using them. The Aussie Open's going to be played at two of the best. I mean, that Sandbelt Invitational. The best thing about it was the golf courses. We went to four of the best golf courses in the world, not just Australia, and people paid attention. So I think if we use those assets well across this summer, being the players, being the golf courses, that'll help attract the sponsorship and everything like that. And hopefully it can build into bigger and better things over the summers to come. But I'm very, very optimistic about where we're headed and this summer particularly. And again, not to tout my own work, but I wrote something after Cam signed with Liv, and I said, he's not short of a quid now. He's not going to be playing as much. It would be awesome to see him go and tee it up in a state open and not ask for anything. Just show up. The Vic Open is one of the coolest events in the world. There's no ropes. There's no nothing. You got men and women playing in alternate groups. You got two great golf courses. The area of the Bellarine's unreal. To have a guy who's just won a major playing that event and a young kid walks along and watches him play. I remember going to tournaments and sitting down behind the range and watching the Shark hit drivers and just being mesmerized. And that helped me fall in love with the game. And I remember watching Roger Davis in his +4s hitting balls and throwing a cigarette out of his mouth and hitting a few more and picking it back up and being just like, this is unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this. So, that other thing that's part of the game for us here is appearance money. And, we can't get away from it. We need to pay appearance money as it stands because we're remote. We're in when guys like to take a break, guys and girls like to take a break. So, we have to pay it. But if we keep building, maybe we won't have to pay it. Maybe we can attract better fields or we pay less of it. We did that. We got to that point with the LPGA Tour and the WPGA Tour with the Women's Australian Open that was co-sanctioned, and so was the Vic Open, and then COVID just did us in. So I think that's a bit of the model for the men's game is to try and use the best courses and try and time it to have the best fields and lean on our Aussie players. We pay, elite squad players, money to start their careers. I mean, Golf Australia, not us, but Golf Australia, the organising body. So get them back here and get them playing and get them talking, the way live golfers talk about their tour, about our tour and about our events and our golf courses. And maybe it'll help. I don't know. It seems to be the approach for them. So maybe it should be our approach.
I mean, I know why we're going to Kalgoorlie. The reason that we go to Kalgoorlie is obviously the city of Kalgoorlie Bowl to pay a shit ton of money because we've got a lot of mining royalties over here in WA. But geez, it's a tough place to start the season. 7 hours east of Perth on the road. Far out. I tell you what, if we're going to take anything regional over here in WA, surely we're going to Bunbury. 2 hours straight down the freeway. Like it's got to be the spot.
I must say, like I've a couple of times tried to get over and cover that WA PGA because I want to check it out. And
looks awesome.
COVID and a couple other things have fallen in the way. And you know, I think one year it must have clashed with an overseas event that I was off covering, so it just didn't work. But the golf course, from everyone I've spoken to, is amazing, and it looks amazing with the red dirt around the green. And the players love the week as well. You know, they get looked after. They go up there. It's a bit different. Yeah, it's not ideal that you got to go that far. And it's an expensive week, I'm sure, as well, you know, to get up there and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, I think the big thing for that one is it's not a spectacle for TV or anything like that, although it would be great to, you know, showcase that golf course because a worldwide audience pays attention to that sort of thing. They don't see that very often. But it's about the players and about the sponsors. And if the sponsors keep stumping up the money, and if the players want to keep going there, then let's keep playing it. You know, it may not be our biggest event of the year, but if those guys like it, let's play it. And like I say, I would absolutely love to get up there and see it and be a part of it, because the pro-am element of it, apparently everyone really loves. And, you know, it just seems it's good winners every year too. Like they put on a good event. So, yeah, it's maybe not ideal to have such big things, but that's Australia, and that's part of being a tournament golfer. I mean, I did a story with a guy, Dale Brandt Richards, who doesn't play anymore, a couple of years ago, who I knew when he was an amateur, and he turned pro and played the Pro-Am circuit in the Aussie tour, and he basically drove everywhere. And he clocked up his Ks, and he clocked up his petrol, and he clocked up, you know, pop tires and everything like that. And it's a unique backstory, and it's a story that's typically Australian golf. So, you know, it's maybe not ideal, but it's part of what we have. And so, you know, if they want to have an event, you know, somewhere like that, well, let's have it and let's do it. You know, if Barn Boogle had an event, it would be impossibly difficult to get to. It would be hard
impossible
to
get broadcast.
it would. There's so many things, but I'd be so on board with that idea. Yeah. I think it'd be amazing. I think everyone would. So, yeah, just because something's difficult or not perfectly situated doesn't mean we shouldn't try and do it. And like I say, if the players particularly like it, you know, you got to please the players. And, you know, as you might notice from, you know, some people complaining about things, sometimes they're not always the easiest to please. So if they're happy with it, let's go with it, right?
That's right. The TPS has been an incredible sort of addition to our schedule. We, you know, sort of when it first launched, me and Marshy were wondering, is this just sort of a band-aid to get us through COVID? And we're a little bit skeptical, and to see it grow to what it has now, and to see it get the sort of the worldwide acclaim that it's got, you know, around even in America and throughout Europe as well, it's been fantastic. And it's awesome that it's here to stay for good. I guess what's your take on the TPS, and I guess if you got any sort of backstory on maybe how it came about and why they went down this path?
Yeah, I love it. I think it's one of the best things that's happened in Australian golf for a long time. I know Nick Dasty and Kim Felton, as I mentioned earlier, had a big role in it. We've spoken in sort of bits and pieces about how it came about, but you know, they'd be the best ones to talk about the actual formation of it. But just the idea of getting more playing opportunities, you know, and it came to light first time during the first start of COVID, I think, from memory, or maybe just before that. But and it involved getting someone to host it who gave it a bit of profile, and Jeff Ogilvy was the first one, and then Braithen Astor and all that. And it's just such a great concept, because like I said, the Vic Open's a great event where they play their own events and, you know, just competing on the same golf courses. The Aussie Open's going to be like that this year. I'm not as convinced that I think the National Opens should be side by side. You've got two cuts happening during the event, but it's going to be great. I mean, it's the first time it's happened with the National Open. So, you know, we've got to wait and see how it goes, but I do think it will be good. But the Players Series where they're playing each other is a fantastic concept. And I think it's been a learning process for people involved. You know, I was there the first TPS Sydney caddying actually for Aaron Pike, caddying him to a miscut, of course. But, you know, and we played with, you know, a couple of the women across the first 2 days, and they were clearly learning how to get the tees right and getting the flags right, because it's not just as simple as, oh, the average distance is this, so let's shorten the holes by this, because you've got hazards. The golf course is a part of a tournament. So you might push the tee forward, but you actually push the women into a narrower driving corridor. So you got to be mindful. So they've clearly learnt, and they're getting better at that. I think the concept was so great and was getting such good reception, but we needed one of the women to win one. It was getting to that time to prove its thing. And I mean, it took Hannah Green, who's one of the best players in the world. And I was with her the week before at the Vic Open, and you can understand how she won. She wouldn't have, she would have beaten anyone those 2 weeks. She was unbelievable considering she'd come off a spell. So, but that gave it validity because everyone around the world paid attention, that women beat the men. And there's been, covering a lot of them, Sydney and Hunter Valley this year as well. There's genuine excitement from players and from the fans. And, it's great to watch them. They bring in the junior element, which is often forgotten because, we're so focused on it being men and women. The juniors coming in on the weekend is even greater to watch because, we stood under a tree at Bonnie Doon when it absolutely pelted down with rain on the Sunday last year. And there was a group of the men's tour players, women's tour players, and a couple of the juniors all standing around, all talking. And the tour players were as excited to talk to the juniors and tell their mates about how good this kid swings it and all that sort of stuff, that you can see everyone's invested in the concept. So, if that's the sort of innovation we're going to come up with for the Aussie summer, I think we're going good. And I think it's great that the TPS is such a successful thing. Like I say, I love it. I think it is so good though that our tours, I should say, haven't taken the success of it as then it's a Band-Aid fix for every single tournament. I think that would be a really big mistake to think we've got a success with this, let's do it everywhere, because we don't need that. We need to have different events. So let's have standalone WPGA Tour events. Let's have standalone PGA Tour of Australasia events. And then let's have the TPS series, mixed in there. And it gives us great balance and difference. And that it's a different week. You see the Players Series and it's going to be a different event. So, I think that's one of the best innovations in tournament golf I've seen for a while, for sure.
Been very generous with your time, mate. We'll let you go with this one. Who are we looking out for this year on the Aussie tour? I mean, last year, Jed Morgan, incredible performance at the Aussie PGA, and basically, courtesy of that, he won the Order of Merit, which, everyone's got an opinion on. But who are we looking out for this year? Who might be topping the Order of Merit, and who are the names that will be popping up on our screens?
Geez, that's a hard question. It's always dependent on who's
too. That's good.
Yeah, that's right. It's always a question of who's playing here, to be honest, with whatever other commitments they've got to be able to get here. I think he was very impressive last year, and it's going to depend. He's one that's going to depend on what his status is with other tours. But excuse me, Anthony Quayle is he is on the cusp of really breaking through to being, on a top tour around the world. Quayle's game is so good. He's a lovely bloke. That helps. Second best moustache in Australian golf behind myself, but he's such a good player in every area. And I've been watching him since he played an Aussie Open as a young bloke, and he's really on the edge. And if he plays a fullish schedule down here, he'll be right near it. Another guy that's again a bit older, but is again right there is Todd Sinnott. Todd, when he came out as a young guy, was so impressive because he hit it so far, and that distracted people from how good the rest of his game was. Like, Todd's game is unbelievable T2 green. And he had a bit of bad luck with injuries and a few things, and he's been doing so well on the Asian tour and stuff. If he comes back and plays here, he'll make a serious run. And then of the younger guys, Louis Dobler is really impressive. He's just got everything, and he's a mellow, calm guy, and I love watching him play golf. He's complete package basically, and I've known about him since he was about 12 years old, which makes me feel like an old man. But I think Louis in that side is going to be really good. And then younger guys again, Jeffrey Guan, who's winning everything as an amateur. he's impossible to ignore. Like, the guy has got some serious skill. So he's going to be great to watch as well. And then another one who I think, probably two guys who I think if you watch them, they're really professional about how they go about it, and they look like they belong on big tours. And that's Demi Papadatos, who probably gets a start in this sort of conversation every time. And I've known Dim for a long time, but Demi looks like a European Tour player. I don't mean aesthetically, although that's not far off the mark either.
Very true.
He does. He does. The stallion.
But
he does.
But everything about him, the way he goes about it, he gets there and he does his work. And I think Demi's, he's so close to that kick on, and he's had so many close calls with it. And Blake Collier is another one. Blake Collier is a guy who works so hard. And, I think he led 3 events after 54 holes or something similar over the summer and just didn't get it done. But yeah, Blake works so hard at his game that, he has to come through. And women's side, I think, Steph Kyriakou is still like achieving, but she's a star. She's going to have bad weeks, Steph. Like, she's going to show up and play awful and not shoot scores, but she's going to show up the next week and shoot unbelievable scores and win the thing. And Karis Davidson's another one who's come in a long way of quietly just putting together a nice little year on the LPGA tour. And I think she'll be impressive to watch over the women's events over the summer as well.
It's good you've given us about 37 names there to put in the black book for summer. So we should.
Yeah, well, that means that I don't show up at the first event and get dirty looks from someone. I'll leave you with one. As I mentioned, caddy for Aaron Pike. I've known Pikey for a long time and done a bit of caddying and stuff for him. And I, at the Aussie PGA, wrote the preview and listed the players to watch. And it's kind of a bit of a scattergun approach when you're doing that sort of thing, because there's a lot of good players. I list the thing, and Pikey comes up to me on a Thursday morning and says, read your preview. I noticed the name A. Pike was missing from the players to watch. I said, yeah, well, you can't fit everyone in, can you? And he putts out on the first day, and he's second, I think, to Louis at 6 under.
Yeah, I think he hit like a 66 or something.
Yeah, and he walks past all of the journos, not many of us, but all of the journos stand there and just loudly says, shows what you know. They're just gone. And so, I'm just trying to cover myself so I don't show up and get absolutely baked by someone who says, oh, geez, you're a bit harsh on me. But I'm sure there'll be someone who complains.
So we'll just add Aaron Pike to the list of 37 that you just gave us. So 38 there for Pikey.
Pikey's now a serial PGA Tour of Australasia winner, so he can't be like a player to watch.
To watch, yeah.
He's a veteran now.
He'll listen to this as well, so you better make sure that you do bloody mention him.
I'm sure the phone call will come, and there'll be something.
Jimmy, you've been incredibly generous with your time, as Drew said. Appreciate. I think just getting the time to have a bit of a chat about, I suppose, your journey, but also where the game is at. It's always nice to share a bit of time with someone who has as much passion for it as we do. So, hopefully, the first of a few, and hopefully, we run into you on the rope line there at a few of the tournaments across the summer. So, thanks again for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me. It's been great, and happy to do it anytime. And I'll be out there. You'll see me getting sunburned every week.